Thank you for joining us today to discuss the California Marine Invasive Species Program's annual vessel reporting form and use of our web-based user interface, MISP.io. My name is Nicole Dabrowski. I am the Assistant Chief of the Marine Environmental Protection Division at the State Lands Commission, and I'm also the manager of the Marine Invasive Species Program. Before I introduce our speakers, I'd just like to go over a few housekeeping items. Just letting you know that this webinar is being recorded. The question and answer session will not be recorded. The slides and the recording will be available after the webinar, or probably tomorrow on the Commission's website, www.slc.ca.gov. If at any point along the way you wish to ask a question, we'd like you to use the chat feature within Teams. So please open up that chat box and you can write your questions there. We're going to hold questions until after the presentations are done and when we've stopped recording, and then we will address them. I'd like to encourage you to please remain on mute during the presentation so we're not background noises. So today's presenters are myself. I'll be discussing proposed amendments to the California biofouling management regulations and specifically the reporting requirements. Our second speaker will be Jackie McKay. She is an associate governmental program analyst with the State Lands Commission's Marine Invasive Species Program, and she'll be discussing use of user interface, MISP.io. Our third speaker will be Armand Garib from MCorp, which is the Commission's the Marine Invasive Species Program database contractor, and he will site security of MISP.io. And when we're all done with those presentations, we should have plenty of time for question and answer. So I encourage you to write down your questions as they come up, and we will do our best to get to all of them. So I'm going to start in with my presentation to discuss the proposed biofouling changes to our proposed biofouling regulations. So specifically, I want to talk about submission of the Marine Invasive Species Program's annual vessel reporting form. This is a form that vessels must submit once per calendar year to the Commission. It is due 24 hours in advance of the first arrival at a California port for that calendar year. The form requires that you provide information on the hull husbandry practices of the vessel, provide information on vessel operational profile, such as vessel speed, time spent in port, and also asks for information about the use and maintenance of ballast water treatment systems on board the vessel. We have a number of challenges associated with the submission of these reporting forms, at least from an administrative side with the Marine Invasive Species Program. First of all, the form is 16 questions and 6 pages information. So as I'm sure you're familiar with filling it out, it takes a little bit of time to fill it out, and it's extremely valuable information for the Commission. Approximately 1,850 vessels are subject to the annual vessel reporting form submission requirement each year. Currently 90% of the AVRFs that we receive are submitted as an attachment to an email. For each email we receive, we print up that form, the 6-page form, we date stamp them to ensure to show proof of submission. We enter the data into the database, and then we file that form. The Commission's retention policy requires that we keep those forms filed for 5 years. So all told, we receive about 11,000 pages annually for this reporting form, and so we have to process all of those pages through printing, date stamping, entering into the database, and filing. Together, that approximately 1,727 hours per year to process all of those AVRFs. So overall, the process is labor intensive. So we're proposing to make a change to ensure that we're as efficient and effective as possible in our use of state resources. So right now, we are in the process of proposing an amendment to Title II of the California Code of Regulations, Section 2298.5. That's the section within the biofouling management regulations, sometimes known as Article 4.8. The proposed change would require that all vessels submit the AVRF via MISP.io and no longer through email or through fax. We are proposing that that change would be effective January 1 of 2021. There are several benefits to making this proposed change. We estimate that moving towards submission through MISP.io would reduce our processing time from 727 hours per year to 154 hours per year, which is a significant savings of time. The savings, those hours of savings are valued at approximately $58,000. And we are a small program with a small budget, and so that's a significant savings for the Marine Invasive Species Program. We would be able to use those hours and dollars to other program needs, including inspection and enforcement, outreach and education, and research to address the risks of species introductions to California waters through vessel vectors. So we already initiated the rulemaking process, and many of you have perhaps commented on the proposed change. We published the proposed regulatory change in the California Notice Register on May 8th of 2020. The public comment period was open through June 23rd, which was a 46-day public comment period. During the course of the public comment period, we received 5 letters totaling 22 individual comments. 14 of the comments were not directly relevant to the rulemaking, so they asked questions about the purpose of the annual vessel reporting form as a whole, or asked about specific questions within the form. And since the form itself was not subject to the rulemaking, we only proposed to change the method of submission. Those were not considered relevant to the rulemaking, and we hope to answer those questions and reach out to the interested parties, but as part of the rulemaking, we're not required to formally respond to those. So the remaining comments really fell into 2 general categories. One was a concern about the lack of consistent and available broadband internet for vessels. And the second series of comments suggested or requested that an alternative submission method, specifically email with a PDF attachment, continue to be allowed even once the regulations are adopted. We have 2 main responses to those comments. The first one is that within Article 4.8 and Title II of the California Code of Regulations, Section 2298.9, there is a provision for petition for alternatives. And so vessel owners and operators can petition the commission in writing. Email is okay and is considered a written submission, requesting an alternative method of submission. So a vessel or owner or operator could request permission to submit the form via email, indicating the reason why the vessel can't submit it through MISP.io. This alternative request may be approved by the Division Chief of the Marine Environmental Protection Division. And so it's important to note that those requests do not need to go to the Commission, because that often takes longer to process. These requests can be processed rather quickly by the Division Chief. Additionally, at the Commission in August, when this proposed regulation was discussed, the Commission and the Executive Officer committed to not enforcing this proposed regulation for 1 year, while we focus on education and outreach efforts to ensure that the regulated community has the ability to submit those forms via MISP.io. So where are we in the approval process at this time? The proposed regulation was approved by the State Lands Commission on August 20th of 2020. The proposed change was also just approved by the Department of Finance. And at this point, we are about to take the final step, which is to submit the package to the California Office of Administrative Law. They're the agency in California responsible for ensuring compliance with the Administrative Procedures Act. So we plan to have this submission this week, and our plan is still to implement the proposed change on January 1 of 2021.